What concessions should Russia make for a real peace? That is the question the European Union is now trying to answer with a concrete list of conditions. This was stated by EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, who says a durable peace cannot exist without clear steps from Moscow. According to Kallas, Brussels does not see signs that Russia is negotiating seriously. On the contrary, Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities have intensified even during diplomatic contacts. She says this directly contradicts the idea of genuine peace talks. The EU position is that pressure and demands should be directed at Russia, not Ukraine. Among the possible conditions now being discussed are the return of thousands of Ukrainian children taken to Russia and limits on the size and military spending of Russia's armed forces after the war. The goal is to reduce the risk of renewed aggression. Kallas also warned against increasing pressure on Kyiv from Washington. She stressed that Ukraine is already negotiating from a position of heavy dependence on external support. The EU draft framework of peace conditions is expected to be circulated among member states in the coming days for political discussion. A horrifying overnight attack hit Kharkiv, killing an entire young family and shocking the city. A Russian drone strike destroyed a residential building, leaving 4 people dead, including 3 very small children. According to Ukraine's State Emergency Service, rescuers pulled the bodies from under the rubble, a 34-year-old man and 3 children less than 2 years old. 2 more civilians were injured in the strike. Among them is a 35-year-old pregnant woman who was hospitalized. Local authorities say this was a targeted night drone attack on a civilian area, once again hitting homes rather than military sites. Kharkiv, which sits close to the Russian border, remains one of the cities most frequently hit by missiles and drone strikes. Ukraine is preparing for a major political step that could reshape the next phase of the war and peace talks. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is planning presidential elections alongside a national referendum on any future peace deal with Russia, according to reporting by the Financial Times, citing Ukrainian and Western officials familiar with the discussions. The plan comes as the White House increases pressure on Kyiv to move faster with negotiations and political decisions. According to the report, the Trump administration wants both the election and the peace deal vote to take place by May 15. The message from Washington is direct. Delays could put future U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine at risk. If confirmed, this would be a sharp shift in position. Until now, Zelenskyy has repeatedly said that elections cannot be held under martial law, with millions displaced and roughly 1/5 of the country under Russian occupation. Ukrainian law currently blocks national elections during wartime conditions. Sources say Zelenskyy may formally present the plan on February 24th, the anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. The timeline discussed with the U.S. partners reportedly aims to finalize key peace documents by early summer. So far, there has been no official public decree launching the election process, but the discussion itself signals how strongly diplomacy, military support and domestic politics are now being tied together in the next stage of the war. Russia could try to move from the Arctic direction, and Norway says it is preparing for that risk. The country's top military commander, General Kristofferson, says the armed forces are planning for a scenario where Russia might attempt a limited incursion from the north. This would not be about conquering Norway. The concern is more strategic, protecting Russian nuclear forces near the northern border. The Kola Peninsula hosts submarines and missile systems that form a key part of Russia's nuclear second strike capability. According to Kristofferson, this is one of the few Russian military assets that directly matters in strategic balance with the United States. In a wider NATO conflict, that area could become extremely sensitive. That is why Norway is already adjusting its defense planning, not only for a classic invasion, but also for sabotage, hybrid threats, and fast Arctic operations. operations. He also noted that Russia is still respecting the demilitarized status of Svalbard, and Norway is not planning to deploy troops there. Speaking about Ukraine, Christopherson added a blunt historical lesson: taking land is often easier than holding it. Occupation is always costly and draining, and expansionist wars usually break on that reality. They are being used as cannon fodder. That is how Kenyan officials describe the fate of their citizens who were recruited by Russia and sent to fight in the war against Ukraine. Kenya's deputy foreign minister says recruiters lure people with promises of jobs, but once they arrive, many end up pushed into military contracts and deployed to the front. Some were told they would work in security or civilian roles, but instead found themselves in combat units. According to European media reports, more than 30 Kenyan citizens have been evacuated from Russia over the past 2 months. Kenyan authorities have already moved to shut down recruitment agencies linked to these schemes. Kenya's foreign minister plans to travel to Moscow to demand that this practice stop. Nairobi also wants to bring home its citizens who are now held as prisoners of war in Ukraine and check on those being treated in hospitals. Western investigations have previously reported that Russia has been actively recruiting fighters in poor countries across Africa and the Middle East using intermediaries, social media, and deceptive job offers. Ukraine is preparing a noticeable reset of how its air defense and frontline support systems work. President Zelenskyy says a series of internal changes are already in motion, and some of them will soon reshape how regional air defense units and combat brigades are organized and supplied. According to him, in several regions, the air defense setup is being almost fully reorganized. This includes interceptor teams, mobile fire groups, and the entire short-range air defense layer. Zelenskyy stressed that this is only one part of a broader defense reforms now underway, with the more structural changes being prepared behind the scenes. He also put special emphasis on the frontline supply chain. Not only drones and weapons are under review, but also personnel. Zelenskyy called people the key issue: training, rotation, and real reinforcement of brigades. The Defense Ministry and Military Command are working on concrete decisions to fix weak points and strengthen units. Details are not public yet and will be presented once the plan are finalized. This week will also bring two important international security moments for Kyiv. One is a defense ministers' format meeting with the partner countries, where new military aid packages are expected to be announced. The second is the Munich Security Conference, where Ukraine plans to deliver direct messages to European and American partners about battlefield needs and next steps.
Many changes are underway in our air defense operations. In some regions, the way teams work is being almost completely reorganized. Interceptors, mobile fire groups, and the entire short-range air defense component. But this is only one of the elements of defense that needs changes, and the changes are coming.
Russia is massively increasing its ammunition production and is already working not only for the current war against Ukraine, but for possible future wars. That is the conclusion of a new Estonian intelligence report highlighted by the Financial Times. According to their estimate, Russia factories produced more than 7 million shells, mortar rounds, and rockets last year. That is a sharp jump from the previous year. Much of the growth comes from brand new production sites built during the war. The report also says North Korean ammunition deliveries played a major role. These supplies helped Russia refill its artillery stocks and keep up the intensified fire on the battlefield. What stands out is the contrast. Russia's economy is under pressure and recruitment is getting harder, but military production keeps accelerating. Analysts say the Kremlin is planning for a long confrontation, not a quick end. Estonian intelligence does not expect an immediate Russian attack on NATO, but it warns that Moscow still sees itself in a deep conflict with the West and is increasing intelligence and influence operations while using peace talk language mainly to gain time and strategic space. At the same time, Russia's oil money is no longer flowing like before. Budget revenues from oil and gas have dropped sharply. And this is already visible in official numbers. This is reported by the Associated Press. For years, and especially during the full-scale war, oil and gas exports were Russia's main financial lifeline. Energy sales helped fund the state budget and sustain military spending. Now that the cash stream is shrinking due to new US and EU sanctions and tighter enforcement against sanction-dodging schemes. According to AP, Russia's government revenue from oil and gas taxes fell to about $5 billion equivalent in January. A year earlier, it was almost 3 times higher. Experts say this is the lowest level since the pandemic period. What changed? The United States imposed sanctions on Russia's largest oil companies. The European Union moved to block not only Russian crude, but also fuel products made from Russian oil and third countries. At the same time, Western governments are increasingly targeting the so-called shadow fleet, aging tankers used to move Russian oil outside sanction controls. Hundreds of such vessels are now under restrictions. Another pressure point is India. After 2022, India became one of the biggest buyers of discounted Russian oil. Now Washington is using tariff and trade pressure to push New Delhi to scale those purchases down. Shipments have already declined, though analysts say India is unlikely to cut them to zero anytime soon. There is also a pricing problem for Moscow. Russian oil now sells at a steep discount compared to global benchmarks. If world prices are above $60 per barrel, Russian blends can trade far lower. Since Russian production taxes depend on price, that directly reduces state revenue. To cover the gap, the Russian government is borrowing more from domestic banks and raising taxes at home. Economists warn this adds strain to an already overheated war economy and keeps inflation high. Experts quoted by Associated Press sum it up simply: sanctions are no longer just symbolic. They are working. Ukrainian skeleton racer Vladislav Hereskevich has gone into open disagreement with the International Olympic Committee for a very personal reason. He says that even after the ban, he still plans to compete wearing a helmet that honors Ukrainian athletes killed in the war with Russia. His helmet shows the faces of more than 20 Ukrainian athletes and coaches who have died since the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. The IOC ruled that he cannot use this helmet in competition, saying it counts as a political message. Instead, officials suggested he wear a black armband as a compromise. Hereskevich rejected the idea. He said if the IOC betrays these fallen athletes, he will not betray them. He has already worn the helmet during all official training sessions and says he plans to keep it on for a race day. He explains it simply. This is not politics for him. It is memory and respect. He says today's sport exists because people are sacrificing their lives and they deserve to be remembered. Hereskevich also pointed that what he sees as double standards. He says there have already been political gestures and even Russian symbols seen at the Games without punishment. So he questions why a memorial helmet is treated differently. At the same time, he stresses he does not want a fight with the Olympic movement. He wants to remain a part of the Olympic family, but as he puts it, some things matter more than formal rules, especially when it comes to dignity and the price of freedom.
Russian athletes already able to compete under own flag, and I believe it's a very big mistake, especially in this time. Even if you talk about yesterday and before yesterday about Russian flag on a helmet of athlete, I already seen a lot of news that it was used in Russian propaganda. It was used in a way that Italy are welcoming Russia. And we also saw yesterday Dvorkovich, head of FIDE, with sweatshots with Soviet Union signs. It's a big shame. It shouldn't be like that. And if you talk about peace and if you talk about Olympic values, we definitely should talk about these situations. It shouldn't be there. And it's important to understand that Ukraine are defending not only themselves, not only, it's also defending whole democratic world. And it's important to support them.
Thank you for watching. For more content, please subscribe.